Hopefully you'll never have this guy in your audience. But if you do, you still have to answer this question in a meaningful way. But what do you mean by meaning? We've talked several times that the definition of interpretation is to help people discover meaning. But what is that? How do we do it? Well, it's difficult because, for one thing, it varies with the people, the time, the place, the mood they're in, the information they're bringing with them. So in a lot of ways, it's hard to determine what is going to be the meaning for someone. That being the case, we sort of have to provide as many cues as possible. This is one of the reasons that the interpretive profession has developed this concept of tangibles, intangibles, and universals. This is a way for us to organize our thoughts, organize our presentations, so that we have the biggest chance of providing people with a stimulation for developing meaning. I really think this is the hardest but the most important lesson in this whole course. It's the hardest because I know I've struggled with this. I'm kind of an intuitive thinker, but to do this business of tangibles, intangibles, and universals, you kind of have to step back from the way you think. We all deal with these things all the time. We all are aware of the tangibles, and we have the various meanings of them, and both at all kinds of levels. But to make yourself step back and analyze what you're saying and be able to present things so that they do this for other people, I think is really pretty difficult, but we're going to work on it really hard. I think it's the most important lesson because we have a chance. We have an opportunity with people in our park, in our boat, wherever we're working with them. We have a chance to help them discover how to really enrich in their lives. Just think how many people kind of go through life seeing things as being ordinary without paying much attention to them. What we have the chance of doing here is giving people the opportunity to see how you can find tremendous meaning in almost anything. It is that thing of finding the extraordinary in the ordinary. Well, let's figure out how to do this. Tangibles, intangibles, and universals. We start with the tangible, something that people can see, feel, hear, something that's in their hand that they're familiar with. Then it's up to us to help them understand the intangible things that tangible thing does. I'm going to talk some specific examples about this in a few minutes. And then we go from there to moving that to the highest and deepest and broadest level of universals. How do these things apply to the kind of the broadest issues that we deal with in life? Talking about broad issue, is the Grand Canyon just a big ditch, or is it a really special place? I hope you've been there. As far as I'm concerned, it really is a special place, but it is a big ditch too. It's both of those things. And it can have meaning to people from both of those perspectives. We kind of have to be careful not to be critical of the people who say, well, man, look at the big ditch there. That's their expression. That's their expression of awe, perhaps. We tend to sort of go for, at least I do, the kind of people who tend to bow down and say, oh my goodness, what an incredible place. Both of those are legitimate expressions. And the opportunity that we have, in fact, the job that we have, is to take people from wherever they are. We can't convert them into being something else. We shouldn't try to convert them into being like us, but to help them develop from where they are. So if somebody walks up and says, golly, what a huge ditch that is, well, okay, help them really understand what a huge ditch that is, how long it took to do it, how it was done, flowing water. They didn't have any major backhoe equipment to do that with. Where did the materials go? You know, just a huge amount of things that can catch the attention of someone who thinks of this in a very practical way. On the other hand, if somebody comes up and sort of bows down in front of the canyon and in awe, we can help them develop that awe, that awesome feeling, partially by knowing how it was made. The same things that might appeal to the very practical person can also deepen the sense of appreciation and knowledge of the person who looks at this in a spiritual way, if you will. Let's take a very practical local example, something as maybe you might think of as ordinary as a tree. This is not particularly an ordinary tree. It is a plateau live oak. It's in my backyard. It is about a half a mile from the springs, San Marcos Springs. So this is in our Headwaters Learning Laboratory. But we're used to trees. We perhaps don't pay too much attention to them. But when we start thinking about what a tree actually does, what it actually is, it is actually an awesome thing to behold. Let's start with tangibles. Leaves, something as simple as a leaf. We all know about photosynthesis. How carbon dioxide is converted to oxygen. That produces carbohydrates. Okay, pretty simple. Pretty well, it's not simple, but we're used to it. It's one of those kind of ordinary things that we probably learned in 6th grade. But when you really think about it, it is just astounding. For one thing, it is the basis of life. We can't live without this process. The atmosphere would be overrich with carbon dioxide, which we can't breathe. We wouldn't have sufficient oxygen, which we have to have, and we wouldn't have food to eat. Even our petroleum-based economy is based on this very process. So right there in the leaves of that tree is the whole process of maintaining, sustaining life on Earth. Oak wood. If you had an audience, you might ask them if any of them are woodworkers. And probably some of them would be, and they certainly would know about oak. Oak is a very strong, resilient wood. It's been used for building things that require a lot of resilience and a lot of strength. The 1797 ship, the USS Constitution, called Old Ironsides, was called that because cannonballs basically just bounced off of it because the planking was oak. Oak trees symbolize strength, durability. They also symbolize good luck. The Celts, Druids, and so forth in Europe really focused on oak trees. In fact, the genus name is Quercus. That is a word that probably is as much as 5,000 years old from the Proto-Indo-European languages. So people have been talking about oaks for a long time. Oaks are the U.S. national tree. So the symbolism of this, the universal meaning of an oak, in many ways comes from the characteristics of its wood. Well, the tree itself is a tangible thing. There it is. But it also serves functions, more intangible functions of habitat and shelter. It's a part of the community on the Edwards Plateau. The fox down there came out and watched me while I was photographing the tree the other day. She uses it for shelter. She hunts in it. She catches birds that are attracted to the tree. It's a pretty important part of her community. The tree's also been an important part of the human community. We found these 2 cannonballs under the tree. They apparently had been dug out by an animal. We found them at different times. They're different sizes. I looked and there were no American cannons of the bore of these sizes. When I was doing research for the San Marcos book, I didn't find any record of battles or skirmishes around the springs, but there was a Spanish garrison there in 1755 and an American garrison in 1855. So probably these cannonballs were left there under that tree, which of course would have been smaller then, but this probably was a lookout, an outpost for the garrisons that were there. So man, what kind of stories can we get from that? In the video, I mentioned this as the Miss Lila oak. My wife and I call it the Miss Lila oak. We call it that because the lady we bought the land from was named Miss Lila, and she was afraid we were going to cut the tree down, which of course we didn't do. Instead, we named it after her and invited her to come visit, which she did. But just that very thing itself symbolizes her. She was a very, very nice lady. And I'm glad to have a tree in my backyard that reminds me of her. So your task is to figure out how to identify things to talk about in this tangible, intangible, and universal way that can stimulate your audience, your visitors, to develop meaning on their own part.